recording. Now, where are you now? You still in Denver?
Yep. I'm 20
And
miles outside of Denver.
What's the community you live in?
Parker.
Okay. Now, there's so much to get into when you start peeling the onion, your background and everything. But Karen was reading and something caught her eye early on. And we were wondering if you would take us back to Buffalo about where you started this madness when you were basically pulling two jobs and working at a family business and had no idea what the future held for you. And and look at you now.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So take us back to Buffalo. This is when you were, I guess, still working at your parents'. They had an Irish bar in Buffalo.
Yes.
Which, that must have been awesome, but not when you're working all the time, I guess.
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah. Now, is it still operational?
It is not. No, my father started the bar for his retirement. His goal was to retire at 55 years old. He did that. And then I'm one of 6 kids, and 2 of my sisters and myself worked in the bar. And he said, "Great, girls, I am ready to retire after 7 years of this." And that was his goal, 7 in, 7 out. He never worked in there. The kids did. And I want you all to be my succession planning. And my sisters and I looked and we're like, no, we do not want to run a restaurant or a bar. We had a lot of fun working in here. So he sold it to 2 of his bartenders. And then eventually they sold the building to Rite Aid. So it's no longer, it's demolished.
Rite Aid.
Yeah.
It's a pharmacy.
Yes.
Okay. Well, in a way it was a pharmacy before. So it's just a different kind. What was the name? Was it McGrath's or what was the name of it?
It was Mud McGrath's.
Yeah. That's
I
awesome.
love that.
Yes.
And the reason we wanted to go back there is because it just reminded me so much of my background. And I was one of 5 kids in Ohio.
Oh.
And then, so
our neighbor.
moving to Texas. Yeah. So moving to Texas was a big move for me. But it's like that. It's that beginning part of your life that I think you said in your book that you could never have imagined where you would be 12 years from, when you left Buffalo. And looking back, it was a huge leap for you to drive cross country and move when you had not left home very much, is what I read.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that it's those things that kind of shape who you ultimately become, I think.
Yeah, some people call it divine intervention, a tug, calling, what have you. I would like to say that it was intentional, but it wasn't. One of my first coaches told me, you're either running from or you're running to. And either way, I think I was running from, meaning my father. Okay, I did not want this business. I was working, and that was a very, very, very passion project, family owned to the bone. Every person that came into that bar, still to this day, 30 years later, what is family to us. And I worked in City Hall as well. And in my contract, I could leave and take a year of personal leave of absence and come back and still have my job. So there was a safety net there in essence. And there was a back door if Colorado didn't work out. But I felt lost. And thankfully, my father called one of my best friends who moved to Denver and said, "Get her out of here." And it broke his heart. Nobody in my family, even I'm one of 36 cousins, nobody left Buffalo. Nobody left hometown. No one left Grandma's Street. And it was a huge leap of faith for me. And so I think I just was feeling a bit like, what's next for me? And I treated it like a vacation and got to Colorado. And fortunate enough I had to get a job, and kind of while I was here figuring out if I was going to stay or what have you, and answered an ad in the good old fashioned classifieds. Maybe some of your listeners remember that, when you applied for a job and actually mailed in a resume or walked it in the front door. I don't even think I had a fax machine. And It was interesting. I got the job immediately on the spot, still doing it for the paycheck. And I love one of my favorite quotes is 90% of life is showing up. And
Yeah.
I'm good at that. I'm deeply curious human being. And now I realize it's one of my superpowers and showing up and join an organization that was in legal space. Thankfully, I had never had an experience with a lawyer and I knew nothing about lawyers at all, other than the
I can
stories I
relate.
heard on TV and all the lawyer jokes that we've all heard. And I fell in love with the profession. And I was fortunate enough, and this is what I really hope, for any of your entrepreneurial or leaders, managers, what have you, listening to this podcast, the reason I am where I am today, 100% is because of the mentors and leaders and bosses that I had available to me. No question at all. Otherwise, I would have just treated that like a job versus an opportunity.
Now, how did that manifest itself where you got this job? You obviously had no real knowledge of the industry, but somehow you ended up gaining a mentor out of that job that served you much, in a much bigger fashion for your career after that. How did that happen?
Well,
How did you get a mentor?
Yeah. So I was hired as a project manager for an attorney advisory team. So it was a national organization where attorneys across the country would join and they get assigned an advisor to support them with business, hiring, firing, all the operations things, people, process,
Right.
et cetera. And there was a team of them and they were failing. Because they really didn't have the structure to support them with a coaching background. So they brought in a national legal coach. And coaching was not even a street term at all. And I was assigned to be his assistant, for lack of a better term. And I will never forget the very first day that I met my boss. I got on a plane, went to a conference in Tampa. He was doing a kickoff for the very first. This was like when lawyers, he was Tony Robbins trained. So he shows up like Tony Robbins. And you can imagine how the heads were blown off of highly analytical. And it was my first exposure ever to any type of coaching at the tender age of 26, 27. And from there, it was hook, line, and sinker.
And you knew you spoke that language? Is that what resonated with you?
I didn't speak that language at all. But going back to my deep curiosity, I've always been a curious kid. My mom would always say that she'd wake up in the morning and I was gone. I was roaming the neighborhood and she'd find me at people's kitchen tables drinking coffee at 7 years old with the moms and all the coffee clutch ladies and just immersed in their conversation and asking questions. And it was just, it's really was in my DNA.
What a great quality to have, though. Curiosity will take you a lot of places if you're just willing to go and learn and ask, like you said, asking questions. That more opportunities come out of that. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because it's one of my earliest memories of my fault that people would always say to me is, you ask so many questions. You're like a 5-year-old where you're like, why? Like you're constantly asking questions. And now I realize that it's my greatest strength.
I can relate, right? Yeah. He says that I can strike up a conversation with a brick wall. So I can definitely relate to that. And it's that curiosity that I think fosters relationships and trust right on the get-go, out of the gate, and brings the I guess walls down for more deep, meaningful conversation.
Yeah, and it has to be authentic, number one, and
Absolutely.
it doesn't need to land like a Spanish Inquisition, so to speak. And I think that's really the biggest fault I see in a lot of leaders, at least the people that I coach and consult for, is they don't really have an appreciation for the power of the pause. and just to be present and listen and ask those questions of, why did you do what you did the way you do? Show me your math, so to speak, of where you got to where you're at right now. And I think we would all learn a lot and get a lot further if we could adopt that.
I don't know if you've had this experience, but this happened to me on more than one occasion where you're in a meeting with other people, peers and whatnot, and somebody in the room will mention something, usually the boss, and they're continuing the conversation. And can you hold on real quick? What is that? I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to. Like they'll use an acronym that they just take for granted everybody knows.
Yeah.
And they'll go, oh, well, it means this, this, and this. You go, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense, and clarify. And then afterward, somebody will come up to you that was also in the meeting and go, thank you for asking that. I've heard that I don't know how many times, and I've just never wanted to ask because I'd feel stupid. I was like, well, get over that. That was the first part.
You wouldn't, yeah. So many people suffer in silence, especially if you're a newbie on the team and you don't know the lingo. And we just assume, well, to your point, I must be stupid, or why I don't understand that. And I don't think we have trained our employees or teammates or the people that we work with enough to say, time out, do the old referee sign if you have to, and say real quick, I'm not understanding, what does that acronym mean? As a business owner and a leader, I would be so grateful. But so many times people just suffer in silence and nod their head. That's what I love about Zoom in this virtual world right now, because you could see the deer in the headlights. Like, Susie, did you know what that meant? She's like, why didn't you speak up? And it's a lot of times because as business owners and leaders, we don't give permission for that. We don't set the ground rules that, you please, if you're not following, if you're not tracking, time out, pause, interrupt, and clarify and verify, because this is for you more than it is for me.
So you go to that first meeting and you see this Tony Robbins type performance up there, and the minds are blown in the crowd. And then, how many years ago was that? Are we talking 20 plus years ago?
Oh yeah, almost 30
years ago. And you had no background in the legal industry. You had worked and lived exclusively in Buffalo, and you're in a brand new town, and you decide, okay, I'm not going back. I mean, it became a deal where, okay, my new adventure has started, and here you are 30 years later, and you've got this huge business that still revolves around mainly law practices, correct?
Yep.
But you've branched out because some of the concepts, I guess, are transferable no matter what competency you're talking about. The hiring, how do you hire great people, and the empowerment and intrapreneurs and these types of things. These are, those are relatable concepts to anybody. But how do you, going back to that first meeting and you're blown away and you're starting this new adventure, how do you start putting the blocks down to build where you are now? What did you decide? Okay, this is what I want to do. Now I'm going to do this to help me along that. Did you find a mentor immediately and that was part of it?
No, I wish I could say it was beautifully laid out like that, and it was a very methodical plan. But in hindsight, I get asked this question all the time. It wasn't. But what I did, and I kept showing up, and I was deeply curious. The second I show up in that room, in a coaching room, where the flashlight is shined on all of the places where you're hiding out, where you have reasons, where you have excuses, where you're not doing what you need to do, there was no going back. There was no turning back and hiding. So at that point, you feel completely naked and raw and exposed, where you're realizing, and I had a year leave of absence before I could either come back to my job or have to resign. I resigned 3 weeks in. And
wow.
I had never been exposed to anything like that. And I realized there's something here. This is my future self. This is, if there's no way I could go back to working in City Hall and government office and not, it's like, you can't unsee or unhear this. And so from there, I really just started being a student for my mentor that I had. I was involved in all of his businesses. He had a coaching business. He had a law practice in Tampa. He had a commercial real estate business. And I truly just shadowed him for, I don't know, a good 10 years on everything that he did. He exposed me to finances, how to run the operations, how to run a business. I witnessed that. And then I still worked with the national organization. And through that, I just kept showing up again and asking questions and asking powerful questions, and just kept getting exposed to more and more and more leadership meetings, and kept asking questions. And through that, I just saw a need. And so often, how my first book came about is I'd go to these conferences, I talk to the employees, I talk to the entrepreneurs, and so often people would say to me, "How do I clone you? How do I clone you?" I'm like, "What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing." And so often I found myself repeating the same thing over and over again, unconsciously. Just someone asked me a question, I would just soul speak it. It would just come right out of me. And I knew the ins and outs of how to run a law practice, which transcend to any other business. And people would say, "You need to write a book. You need to write a book. You need to write a book." I'm like, "Okay, I'll write a book." And so wrote a book with my then business partner, which we're still very best friends. And then people say, "How'd you write a book?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just started talking and saying the things that needed to be said." So I think a lot of it is, not to get woo-woo, but just really speaking from my passion and speaking from what I know in my soul, and finding a way to leverage it. Put it in a book, put it in a podcast, put it into, it started with the book, then the book turned into blogging. I've been blogging for almost 15 years, every single week now. And then it turned into, "Hey, can we hire you as a coach?" And through that, I realized, all right, I need to start treating this like a business. And so I've always had a coach. The second I got exposed to a coach, when I left my mentor, he sold his law practice, sold a lot of his business, virtually retired. Then I started my own business, and I have never gone a day, a week of my life without a business coach and a personal coach. So I have 2 different coaches. And
Wow.
I don't shoe shop. I don't go to the mall. I don't spend my money on jewelry and designer clothes. I spend my money on personal development.
A girl after my own heart.
You shoe shop.
No, I'm
I have a closet. I have a closet that says, well,
Otherwise.
I'm just as guilty, right? Well, and along the way, you're going to these places, and I've been in that situation where you're going. You said you soul speak. You see something, somebody asks you a question, and you're just telling them based on your observations what you know. Well, this is what you need to do. Were there, there must have been some commonalities that you kept seeing that you're like, okay, this is the same issue I keep finding over and over. These are the same problems everybody's facing. What were some of the common denominators that you kept finding?
Great question. The first common denominator, and I think what makes me really unique, is that I can sit in the seat in the perspective of the employee as well as the employer. And so I would go to these conferences, and this is really where I'm like, there's something onto this. There's a need for this, and this is a business that I can create. I'd sit at one side of the cocktail reception table with the business owner, and they will be consistently griping about their employees. It's hard to find people. It's hard to trust people. It's easier for me to do it myself, fix my employees. Nobody cares as much as I do, yada, yada, yada. Then I would turn, and here's an employee sitting next to me on the other side, and they would say they're a control freak. They don't trust anybody. They won't let go of, the files. I see them so completely stressed out. They will not give me time, attention, and feedback, training and onboarding and coaching to support me and set me up for success so I can have their back and take over all the things that I see as waking them up at 2:00 in the morning. They both wanted the same thing for themselves, for the client, for the business, for the end user, but they just were not speaking the same language, and they didn't have any context of how to create the same language.
And what do you think? Is it because it's such a hard thing to let go? If you're the main stakeholder and you're the owner or the top of the chain, is it just that fear of, if I let it get out of my immediate sphere of control, it's still going to come back on me if it fails, and they can't let go?
I think that is a part of it. I think first and foremost, people are picking from their past. So this one time when I hired somebody and they quit on me, or they didn't do their job, or they embezzled money from me, or whatever it is, never going to do that again. So they already have a limiting belief, and they have a ton of evidence of why it doesn't work and why you shouldn't let go of control. I think that is number one, but I think there's even a deeper root cause of it. Entrepreneurs and business owners and leaders at the heart of it are not great managers and trainers. If they were, they wouldn't own a business. They would be managing Chili's. They own a business. They don't know the answer. They don't know the how. They know what they need help with, but they're the ones that typically have to train them and educate them, and they don't have it. They don't have time, first of all, and they don't have the plan to do it. And if they do have a plan, I always say that entrepreneurs are like dogs. They have to make their mark. Even if you give them, here's a rock solid bulletproof plan, go implement it, they're going to mark it up and make their mark, and then turn it into a massive project, and then it'll never get deployed. So I think it's a combination of they're picking from their past. They have so much evidence of where they trusted someone before and they let them down. Not taking into consideration, well, talk to me about your vetting process, your hiring process. What did you do? Typically, people hire in a place of pain. They experience a little bit of growth. They talk to one person, usually a friend of a friend or a family member or somebody who's willing to help them out, but didn't truly put them through a business hiring process. And that person wasn't a great fit. Well, they weren't a great fit because you didn't have a hiring process, and you didn't have an onboarding process, and you didn't have a review process. So they're making emotional business decisions versus data-driven decisions.
Which is hard, especially in the entrepreneurial world, where you're just trying to get a company off the ground, and it's focused on whatever the product, the main thing that needs to get done, and these things fall by the wayside. And to your point, don't have the knowledge or the training to be able to bring that into the organization.
Yeah, it is very hard. And, I always tell people, well, there's two choices. Don't ever trust anyone again and don't do it again, but you'll never be able to grow or scale. And you are going to get crushed. Your energy, your time, you're going to eventually blow up in flames. So if you want to be a rugged individualist and be a true solopreneur, then just be intentional about that and just build a business that allows for you to do that. But if you have these big dreams of growing a $2 million company that's able to service 100 people or impact 1,000 people and make a difference, whatever's in alignment with your vision and mission and core values, then you can't do that on your own. If you're okay building a $1,000 business and doing it on your own, then just get really clean and clear with what it is. But if your goal is to be a millionaire, which most business owners say, when I make my first million, you're not going to be able to do that on your own. Even though social media is riddled with the hustlers that work 4 hours a month and make $1 million a day and what have you, they're not doing it on their own.
Yeah, and that's I feel like that's the exception rather than the rule. I mean,
Yes.
But you mentioned this about the entrepreneurs, and I'm sitting here, it's just hit me right smack in the face about that is a different skill set, because they are, the big picture. They have this vision and they want to get there. They're driving, and they don't want to stop. And all of a sudden, okay, now I've got to do an onboarding. I mean, this person's a professional. They know how to do their job, and they got to train you. Well, here's what I'd like you to do. If you could just, Google it, I mean, figure it out. And it's so hard to stop, that pause for the cause where you're going to invest some time into what could ultimately pay off. That's a hard thing to do because time, Karen is going through this right now in her own business venture with some partners. I mean, your timelines are constantly getting compromised. Something's always pushing something back. There's always something that you're fighting these battles every day, and to stop and have to go back and maybe coach somebody up or teach them a skill while you're fighting these battles that's a pretty different skill set. That's hard to do.
Yeah. And if you don't have it as an entrepreneur, one of my favorite books I'm in love with right now is Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman, who wrote Traction. Right? You have it there?
Writing it down.
Rocket Fuel. And it talks about the relationship between the visionary and the integrator. And, and it is a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. I can't do it justice in our time today, but it does talk about that. If you are truly, truly a visionary and not every entrepreneur is a visionary, but if you are truly a visionary and you resent the people stuff, the management stuff, the having to go back, stop and get out of the vision and go back to coaching someone up, then you have to delegate it and hire it out and do it right and have the right person. And doesn't mean you're throwing someone on your payroll they have a whole fractional integrator that you could hire someone for pennies to do it 8 hours, 10 hours a week. When you hire leaders leading leaders, and you're really clear about that, then you don't have to manage people. It's called relationship and communication. I don't care if you have the best person that comes with a chock full resume and they have all the skill set, all the knowledge, or batteries included. You're hiring human beings first and foremost, not human doings. And somebody has to be giving them time, attention, and feedback. And it's a relationship. And that is the part that I think a lot of entrepreneurs miss. They treat the employer as a transaction versus a relationship. And the employee treats it as a relationship and wants it to be a relationship. And when you are in a relationship with someone and it's a two-sided relationship versus a one-sided relationship, they'll take a bullet for you. They'll stay until 7 o'clock at night to miss that deadline. So when people talk about clock watchers and they talk about entitlement employees and people don't want to work and what have you, there's either a breakdown. And when you don't want to give up control, it's because you haven't, in my experience, there's some breakdown in your hiring process or within having a culture of relationship, because the days are over. You should be grateful for have a job. Come in, keep your head down, do what you're told, and you'll be rewarded with a paycheck. We're never going back to that at all.
No.
Ever.
No, we're not. It's so funny because it took something as drastic as what we've had the last couple of years to reverse that mindset. We thought, just starting to get maybe some sort of flexible work environment where you might get to telecommute, a day a week or something. Now it's just, you're right. The genie's out, not putting it back in the bottle. But it is, as hard as it was to hire people prior to 2020, it's even harder now. I think that, because you don't even necessarily have that as much physical relationship with people where you're out meeting and networking and doing that. We're so virtual, and you have an employee a candidate population that is very much aware of the options around them. So you have to give them a reason to want to work for you outside of a paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was going to say some people are stuck in that mindset, right?
Yeah.
I'll money whip them.
They really, really are. And it's so hard to get business owners out of that mindset, because I think they're thinking, well, when this thing turns around, and even if the market crashes or whatever, it's not going to turn around the way that people are anticipating. I have coaching and consulting as one side of my business, and the other side is recruiting. So we've been busier than ever. And to your point, you can put an ad up. People aren't applying for jobs anymore. Right now it's turned into from hiring to sales. So when I go out looking for candidates, I've never had as many jobs as I have right now that I have in 27 years. And I'm really excited about it because my team and I, the only one email we send out when we're trying to recruit for a position is titled, "Are you happy? Are you being treated well? And are you being paid what you're worth? If not, let's have a conversation."
Nice.
Perfect. It's perfect. Because it used to be, it was so easy to sort of scoff at, okay, oh, you want a purpose. Okay, you want work with purpose. How nice for you. Yeah, that's fantastic. Somebody's still got to, make the widgets every day. And it's hard for some people to and I will say this, like I work in a corporate environment. I've seen my boss make a manifest a change in the way he looks at things, which has been pretty remarkable because he was pretty ingrained. But he knows he got he, for lack of a better term, he got religion on this is the way it is now, and he's become very much involved in talking about the vision and here's what's going on and here's what we are going to accomplish. So you can feel that, and I think in our case, it's why our turnover managed to stay pretty reasonable throughout this thing. But it is very hard to get that message to people externally as they sit back there and look at all the options before them. Here's my buffet of options. What makes your job any better? Now, the way you prefaced it, that's a pretty good hook. Are you happy? Well, that's a good starter for sure.
I've never received an email like that.
You've never received that email?
No, I haven't. And had I, things would have maybe been different.
You know what I love what you just said is that with your boss and the remarkable transformation is you said, and you can feel it. And that is the thing, the resource, the measuring stick that many people, business owners, don't realize. I can't tell you how many Zoom interviews I've facilitated with the business owner or HR or what have you, and the candidate. And after I'll debrief with the candidate, and they're like, I know it's more money. I know it's better benefits and bonuses and what have you, and unlimited PTO, but I can't put my finger on it. It's lip service or there's something missing there. And I constantly tell my business owners, you are responsible for the energy you leave in every room. So you have to pay attention because people can see through it right now. So often people are really paying attention to the good old mighty belly check. Like, something's not right here. And I love that you use that term. You could feel it. You could feel the transformation. And that's why you don't have turnover. That's why you don't have a retention problem. And I cannot stress this enough. If you are managing or leading a team or managing, own a business, you have to pour into your employees so much right now, authentically, and really take a look at that because you should be just as deeply interested in your retention and retaining your people that you are to making money, if not more.
I'd agree with you. I absolutely would agree with you. Retention is the ugly little secret when people are talking about the growth and success of business and things that have happened. If you're not retaining your people, and it was already on the decline prior to COVID. I mean, people were waking up and they had more options, and tenure going down, retention going down. This, of course, just put an exclamation point on it. And it's hopefully you had something in the bank already where you had, you'd given some deposits to people over the years where, yes, I have been trying to develop you and care for you. Because if you're starting from scratch and there's another option across the street where this is part of how they do business, it's a pretty easy walk for an employee to go someplace where they feel like they're part of the whole bigger solution. They're part of the goal. They're part of the team. And that's part of what I really liked when you were talking about intrapreneurs. that skill set, entrepreneurs, just that mindset that if you give somebody an opportunity where they feel like they are able to be innovative and part of the solution, without the huge risk that an entrepreneur has, that's a powerful feeling for an employee.
Oh, they'll never, ever, ever, ever leave you. And if they even consider it, to your point, I was on a podcast this morning and they were talking about, there's the onboarding and then there's the exit interview when an employee leaves, right? But when somebody comes in to resign, they were talking about the stay interview, re-enrolling people. And I had never heard that term and I loved it because re-enrolling people, if you can get vulnerable and raw and real and someone comes in and resigns and you can figure out and get deeply curious and be authentic and be quiet and be present and find a way to keep them. I can't tell you how many people I've made job offers to and they have gone in to give their resignation and then they've come back and they're like, you know what? I sat down and I prep people. I said, listen, you're going to go in and give your resignation. They are going to give you unicorns and roses and the sun and star and moons if you're as good as you tell me you are. So what are you going to do? How are you going to handle that? Oh, no. They won't do it. I know they won't do it. I would say right now, thankfully, it's climbing that it's up to 60, 70% come back and say, guess what? They did it. I'm like, no kidding, because they should have, and they re-enroll their employees. So it's not breathing fear into this room that you're screwed if you don't already have that plan in place, but you do have an opportunity to correct. The heartbreaking part is when people let their great employees go and they don't take the opportunity to redefine their culture and what have you. So entrepreneurs are people of that magnitude. You have an entrepreneur. If they come in and they're going to quit and you're not even necessarily offering them a whole lot of extra money and bonuses and perks and what have you, but you're getting deeply vulnerable with them and you're saying to them, you matter, I value your opinion, and we're going to do this a little differently. Because really, at the end of the day, people just want your time and attention. If you're the leader, if you're the visionary, if you're the person running and leading this thing, and you're not giving your people time, in my experience, that's why they leave. And leave. And that's why I love entrepreneurs. They will make statements like our clients. They will make statements like we. Yesterday I had a gal that she did go in. The law firm is dismantling. No fighting, just one's going to be a judge, the other one's going to be in-house counsel, very harmonious. And she went in and gave her notice and they said, oh my gosh, can you give us a month notice because help us close down this thing, et cetera. And she came back to me and she's like, I won't leave them in a lurch. I go, do you understand what this says about your integrity and who you are as a human being? Like, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. So, I really think that, if you have an entrepreneur, if they feel like they have permission, if you hear them when you're having a meeting or a conversation, they're not suffering in silence and just shaking your head. My first book was Don't Be a Yes Chick. They're not just yesing you at everything, but they have some healthy pushback. They have deep curiosity. They're asking questions. Why are we doing it like this? They come to you with proposed solutions versus constant problems. So your goal is not to say, we tried that before, it didn't work, or to shut them down. You actually, first and foremost, need to celebrate and acknowledging them for using their voice and coming to you with ways that you can improve your business, your client experience, and your internal infrastructure.
And that's where that stay interview I found very powerful. John actually taught me about that years ago when I was leading a team, and I was looking for ways to keep my people engaged, to see how they felt in their position, were they fulfilled, were there things that they needed, changes that they saw. And so I structured a stay interview and conducted that with each of my direct reports. And it was amazing, the communication that came out of that. They recognized that I was allowing myself to be vulnerable and giving them the floor to be able to speak to, their views on things, and helped me then implement things that can make the employee more fulfilled in their role, even though I couldn't change their role necessarily. But there were things that I was blind to as a manager that came out of those conversations. And to me, an exit interview, it's too late. You should be doing stay interviews on a regular basis to better your organization and ultimately keep that retention high.
And it doesn't necessarily even have to be the most formal of processes, because I know we love to label things and this is our 360, and then this is our annual review, and this is our scheduled one-on-one. And I will just ask my people occasionally, go, okay, enough of that. So how are you doing? What's going on with you now? Just let me know what's going on, because I want to make sure that it's not just work going on in life. Is everything going all right? You want to take the temperature and share something about yourself. Karen, you just said that you allowed yourself to be vulnerable, which gives somebody else permission as well. And I think that's a powerful thing for a boss as well. And you'll find your people when they don't have that anxiety about I'm going to say something the wrong way, or this is personal, I shouldn't bring it up at work. I mean, those days are gone too. I mean, you have to. We went into everybody's houses over this COVID break. We're on Zoom calls, and you see people's dogs and cats and family members and
kids come through.
Coming through. When the Amazon guy's there, when they're blowing leaves out. It's crazy. And so we kind of, that was a new connection that we had with people. We went into their homes, I think. And because everybody was dealing with home and work, I think we have to be extra, extra sensitive to that now. And I'm not a sensitive person, but I'm, I think I'm observant enough to know, okay, we've kind of gone through that. What is it, like the fourth wall with the media, where now we're talking directly to you as you sit in your home life and your work life have now officially just married each other. And I need you to be happy at both, or one or both are not going to work.
Hallelujah. I mean, I think it is such a great thing. And there's so many studies, I don't know the stats of just how much more efficient and productive people are as well for that. They don't mind hopping on a Zoom at 6:00 at night to figure something out, what have you. I think it's great. I'll give you this example. I've been working from home. My son is 20, so 21 years now. Okay. And I had an office right before the pandemic. I shut it down maybe like 6 months ago. And then now I just do virtual co-working or what have you. As a dinner with my daughter, 16-year-old, and her boyfriend last week. And I don't know, her boyfriend said something, wow, you're on calls early in the morning. And every Wednesday I have a 7 a.m. coaching call with one of my clients, my very first coaching client ever.
Oh, wow.
And so he's been with me forever. And my daughter is getting ready for school at that time. And it was really cool to hear her talk about my coaching call with Jim every Wednesday. And she just laid it on. She's like, he's having trouble with this secretary who blah, blah, blah. And I think he hasn't done her employee review yet. And, but they're still making money and they're meeting their monthly revenue goals. But I think I'm just sitting here and watching this. She goes, it's my favorite Wednesday mornings. I will get up and go eat my breakfast in the corner and listen to it. And then my mom started putting her earbuds on, and she's like, I don't want you to have your earbuds on anymore, because I really enjoyed those conversations.
I do the same thing, John, with you. That's part of working from home too. For me, it's a curiosity. I'm learning as he's conducting business. It's so fascinating. And then also,
well, and vice versa,
bringing a little bit of female perspective sometimes, maybe.
Yeah, it does help. That does help. I am in human resources, and over the years, I have probably worked predominantly with a heck of a lot more women than men. So it helps to have a little level set back here.
So are you saying that you're sensitive now?
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
I think men just they don't sometimes read between the lines as much as women do, because there's just more of our nature, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. And sometimes we're just ignorant to certain signals. I mean, it happens all the time. What's interesting, Molly, is now that we're working from home, you mentioned how much more efficient people are, and how much more productive, that has been one of the eye openers for my boss, those exact words. I mean, when he was really anxiety riddled about, are we going to get people back? I don't know. Cause he's old school. That's how it always has been. I got to be able to walk the floor. And well, he has stated it. If our productivity and efficiency stays like it is, I have no reason to ever ask you to come back. And boy, the response from an employee to that is pretty cool, because in the back of their mind, they're constantly thinking, all right, they're going to bring us back. I know they're going to bring us back. And it's something that, if this had been 2 months after COVID, okay, but it's 2 years, it's done. But, and if you're wondering about people who, one of the concerns was, okay, out of sight, out of mind, they're going to be doing this stuff. Well, studies are showing that, we're actually sleeping less and working more now that people have gone home. And so people, they know what they have to do. It might not be a linear 8 to 5, that might be 7 to 11. And I have a 2-hour gap and then I work till 9 at night. Stuff. People have all kinds of things, but they're doing what they need to do. And it's a pretty neat outcome of a pretty terrible situation.
It is. And just even taking that scenario, like, think about this. You're the employee and you hear from your boss, guys, if we keep clipping at this rate, I don't see a reason for any of us to come back. Do you not believe subconsciously they have an imprint that says, oh, I'm going to overperform and over deliver tomorrow and continually, because I have freedom. I have flexibility. And to your point, now that you have your computer, you have your work, you have your files, you have everything right there. I mean, my executive assistant, I can't tell you how many times she's on East Coast time, I'm on Mountain time, and I wake up and I have emails from her. I go into the CRM like, Holly, why were you working at 2 a.m.? She's like, I couldn't sleep. So I just wanted to get up and I wanted to pound out some work. And she goes, and then I had an energy boost. And so I just kept going. I had a good chunk of the things I wasn't able to get to last week or yesterday or what have you. And by the time my kids got up to hit school, I was actually present with them. I'm actually seeing that when I do wake up, or if it's midnight and I get a burst of energy, I work for an hour or two or what have you, I'm actually more present with my kids in the morning, and then I'm ready to hit my work day after I drop them off at school in present tense, and I'm not all bunched up. I'm actually more efficient.
That's pretty cool. That's neat. So, I mean, it's an added bonus to her to actually get to be with her kids in a present state of mind, as opposed to like we've all done in the past, where you're in the carpool lane and you're trying to handle a conference call and you're trying to mute it so nobody can hear the background noise and all the rest of it. I mean, and now it's just kind of a given that you're going to hear a dog bark or a leaf blower. It's just part of the deal. All right, so let's talk about what's up for you now, because what caught our eye at first when we were talking about interviewing you, Molly, was of course this the Yes Chick that really caught our eye. It was what a great title for a book, and since that book was almost 11 years ago, right?
I know.
Is that
yes? Yeah,
Amazon bestseller, right?
What is a Yes Chick?
It's somebody with employee mentality. So it's a yes chick is somebody who believes that their voice doesn't matter and they will suffer in silence. So they have constantly nodding their head yes when they don't understand the acronyms or the terms of art. They're not stopping and clarifying and verifying and asking powerful questions. They're saying yes to things when they know that they know a better way, a more efficient way, effective way. And it's really, and that book was written both for the employee and the employer. And the reason I wrote it as Don't Be a Yes Chick was because to jar the employee to want to read that. But the sneaky thing is it's a manual for them of how to be a really great employee and to provide value and be an intrapreneur. Because so often we employees believe that the business owner or the manager has the answer, and they don't have the answer. That's why they don't let go of control, because they might not know the best way, or they might not have a guarantee or certainty of that. So it's really to encourage employees and give them permission to actually say, hey, time out. Why are we doing it this way? Or for them to actually come with ideas and to speak their truth and to use their voice and know that they have permission. Not only is it acceptable, but the employer depends on it, especially once you start doing it. Susie, who never spoke before, and starts asking questions on why we're doing things, or starts coming to the meetings with proposed solutions, or walking into your office and say, hey, do you have a quick second? I just want to check in on why, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, the bosses keep saying, well, what does Susie think? Go to Susie. And that's how you climb the proverbial corporate ladder, if you will, but suffering in silence. And then, I talk a lot in the book about how we'll complain, but you got to take responsibility for your own learning and success.
So let me ask you this question, because I feel like I have that entrepreneurial spirit, and I used that at an established company that I was with, and my manager did not appreciate that. In fact, called me going rogue until I had success, and then he took ownership of it.
Funny how that works.
Often I felt like I was being reprimanded for bringing that spirit to the table, and I guess I'm answering my own question. There's probably just a question left, right?
That's why I told you. Yeah, we finally got her out of there. That's a bad culture.
But if you
No,
were a coach,
I don't know if that's
what
the
would you
answer.
say?
Yeah. Well, I would say, it's the old saying of, how do you handle a bully? You punch him in the belly. And so I choose to believe people are doing the best and coming from the best intentions. I love Brene Brown talks about that in her books often. And, I do believe that. So come from the best place, that they're not reprimanding you, they're not shutting you down, what have you, because that kind of gives you permission to keep shrinking and or maybe leave. And you have to test those skills. It's a great place if you're like, okay, maybe this person is not a great manager and leader. I'm going to leave anyways if that's the truth. But let me test it out here and sit down and have a courageous conversation. Say, hey, listen, Bob, I've been noticing I've been coming with great ideas that are helping with efficiency, KPIs, ROIs, what have you. From my perspective, this is what I'm sensing, and I would like to just check in. I'm feeling like it's not necessarily an open door policy where you're welcoming these ideas. And from my perspective, this is how it's landing for me. And I just want to check in. What are the ground rules here? And just then be quiet and allow for them to respond. And at least you're having that conversation, because I believe, in my experience, people are coming from their past. So Bob, in this example, could be coming from a very outdated rule book and be completely unaware of how they're showing up in the world.
That is so true. Where were you? Where were you 5 years ago? I should have. What I did was take what I viewed as the cues, and it started to silence me more and more, rather than doing what I'm naturally good at, which is just, let's have a conversation about this and see how we can make things more, I guess, palatable on both ends, or even giving him the benefit of the doubt to explain his viewpoint. Maybe he didn't see the value in some of the things I was bringing to the table, and that would have been an opportunity for us to maybe come to some kind of common agreement.
Yeah. And that's the best example of an entrepreneur too. I will never forget, at one point I owned a business that I sold about 4 years ago. I served as a owner of it with 2 other partners, but I was also the CEO of the company. And as the company grew and grew and grew, and I did train my employees to be entrepreneurs. And I will never forget, we were on such a path of growth. And I was responsible for leading the meetings. And Marcy, my right-hand person, came to me, put time on my calendar, and we were virtual back then. And I get in the Zoom room with her. That was the first time I'd ever heard of Zoom. And I get in there, and she's in tears. And she said, I don't know how to say this, but you've trained me to be an entrepreneur, and you are showing up like a wrecking ball.
Oh, wow.
Are absolutely every meeting that we come in, you show up so frustrated. Any idea that anyone brings to the table, you shut down. And I couldn't even see it. I couldn't even see it.
Right.
So I realized at that moment, because there were so many things that I was doing from an owner perspective and from a CEO. And it was at that point in time after that conversation that I promoted her and removed myself from those meetings and allowed for myself to just do one-on-one stand-up meetings with her every single day.
Wow.
That's interesting.
That took some courage. Good for her. You trained her well and she stepped up.
Yes. Yeah. I couldn't see it. I thought I was being powerful.
Right. Right.
Being a powerful, I'm
interesting.
coming in and I'm owning this room.
I'm going to drive everyone crazy till they quit.
You know what? I want to go back to this because this will tie right into this and we can wrap things up. But you were talking about asking those questions and don't be the yes chick. And it's funny, there's a dynamic that happens, and I'm sure you've seen this. People get higher up in the organization and they'll be in these meetings with a lot of big titles and stuff, and they will just nod along because I've got it pretty good. I've got a pretty cushy thing. Do I really want to is this the hill I want to die on at this point? Do I really want to get into this argument? If you can be that person that comes in and will actively question and get into those types of you are a huge value to that senior leader in the room, because a lot of what they're getting is just nod-alongs, echoes. They're just getting, yep, absolutely, because they've advanced all the way up this level, but they're still a yes man or they're still a yes chick, no matter what the title is. And if you can be the person that says, hey, hold on a minute, I don't know if anybody else is thinking about this, but I have a question. Could I pose it here? You are adding a huge value. And you said that's how you get on the corporate ladder. It absolutely is. And it doesn't matter what level of the organization you are, because those good ideas come from everywhere. And a lot of times they don't come from up in the senior management because they are already pretty happy.
Well, and I love what you just said, because it just really sparked something in me. A lot of times that people are yes chicks and just nod their head too. There's a saying that my very first coach I talked about earlier said to me, so go the coach, so go the coachees. So think about this. I got it good. I have a cushy job. I don't have a tremendous amount of stress or what have you. And I don't know if I want to say anything, because I see you, my boss, my leader, my manager, and you're constantly stressed out. You don't go home and see your kids. You're, always running around like hair on fire. You have so much stress. I'm afraid if I actually speak up, then they might be like, great, you do it then. And I might actually get a promotion. I don't know if I want all that headache. So I always tell my leaders and my managers and my business owners, if you want people to step up and lead, you have to make it seem like you have your shit together, so to speak. You have to make it seem like, because if you want to replace yourself, you have to remember people, again, you're responsible for the energy you leave in the room. People see how stressed out you are and they're like, I don't want that job. I don't necessarily want a promotion, because I really like to see my kids and I like to sleep at night and not walk around being crabby all day.
It's true. I've seen it in an actual 360 meeting where the CEO told the person, hey, and you keep it up, you could be on the track to be the CEO. And the person's reply was, I don't want that job.
No.
I've seen that job and I don't want that job, which is great honesty. But you're like, whoa, you just said that to the CEO. It's like, I don't want your job because it does not look like a lot of fun. And it's true. If you're not, and you know what? Part of that problem too was the CEO wasn't sharing some of the frustration that he had with people who could probably help with that.
Yeah.
So, lesson for him as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Molly, let me ask you a question. This is, if it's dumb, John, you can edit it out. That's fine. Because you're talking about you're doing half of your business right now is recruiting, and then I've seen a lot through your literature and your blogs about building a team, and so where do you even begin as far as building to that team? identifying the entrepreneurs, or do you identify that throughout the recruiting process and interview process? What can you give us some pearls in that?
Oh,
Is my question
how
clear
many
enough?
your question's clear, but we need about a half-day workshop for that one.
Right.
I really truly would say the best way, and I don't mean to promote my own books, but if you could subscribe to my blog or go to my website, I really don't have enough time to answer that, but it starts with culture. It starts with leadership. I can't say enough of so go the coach, so go the coachee, and really investing in your employees like a relationship. First and foremost, right down to your interviewing process. I have on, and I'm happy to give any of my processes, my entire interviewing process to your listeners, anyone who wants to have that, and really how to interview from the human being side of things. First and foremost, you hire right. Then you have an onboarding process. And I don't mean it needs to be systematized and what have you. Start where you are and involve your new employee with the systemization for that. I always tell anyone that I hire, remind yourself that you're going to be replacing yourself. You're going to be hiring your replacement, training your replacement at some time as you evolve, as you grow. So do it right the first time. So as much as possible that you can empower your people to really be part of it, treat it like a think tank and have them be part of that and treat it like a collaboration versus a dictation.
That's good. That is good. And we will, by the way, put all the links to your materials, your book, your website, hiring and empowering solutions. I mean, it's right there in the title. It tells you what you're going to do. And I think the concept's great because you really do. You build a better company, a better culture if you empower those people who are helping you run it. It's not a push down. It's a pull them up. Let's get them up here and right.
Yes.
So I really appreciate the fact that we were able to connect. I can't believe we've talked an hour. I'd love to talk again sometime.
Yes.
Maybe we can have a session where all we do is answer Karen's question.
I would love that.
I only got through. I have a long list here.
Yeah, she's got a long list. No, but your story is great. I think it's one, not to diminish the fact that it takes courage to do what you did, and you followed it. And it's good to be young and courageous and go out there and just take it on. But somebody's got to start with that. You got to make that first decision and do it. And so kudos to you for what you've built. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. So much fun.
Absolutely, Molly. And we will talk again sometime soon. It's Molly McGrath.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.